It's your
Hello. Hello, hello. I feel like I'm losing Colin. Colin is very frozen at the moment. Well, hey, anyone else that's here, I'll welcome you. I'm excited that you're here. I might have to turn Colin off and then is it coming back?
you were
Turn him off.
so
Turn him back on.
choppy as you were doing
Oh no, we're experiencing
that.
technical difficulties. Hello. I don't know if it's me or if it's Colin, but one of us
Oh
is having
goodness.
issues. Hi.
Hello.
Hey. It
I was
seems
about to
like
send
we
you
might be back in
a
sync.
message saying you were frozen.
Well, it's for
It's
me.
really
You
weird.
were
It was
frozen.
frozen for the
Hey.
longest time.
Well, it's a
Frozen
great
plus
way to
frozen.
start. Good difficulties. This is how you know it's
A real
live, people.
confidence booster.
Oh man! In other news, we're really excited because it's Penelope's anniversary today. So we're just extra happy today. So
That's right. We're
we pick up
celebrating
on
with
that.
some frozenness. That's right. Why
Yes.
not?
Well, if you're new here, we do these live streams every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time or whatever time that is for you. And we do different topics every week. So today we're talking about cash flow. We have been doing our profit formula and going down our profit formula, which we do have one more topic related to that, but we're going to throw you for a loop and put cash flow first because we've been getting, it seems like it's a really common topic of questions. Like when we first started this group, even we got like pretty much all cash flow questions, and we've answered some of them already. We'll answer some of them today. So it's so critical. It's such a critical topic.
Yes.
And just
Yes,
to
it
give
is.
you a heads up, we're gonna give it to you straight today about cash flow because we're not doing you any favors if we just tell you what you want to hear. Like we're going to tell you what you need to hear in order to sleep well at night and know that your company is doing okay from a cash standpoint. Because the real thing, this is an important statistic, the real thing is that 82% of small businesses that fail because of cash flow issues. Which is
Yikes. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
scary. That is scary. So yeah, I like the analogy. I always say that, cash flow is like oxygen and then profit is like your blood, right? So your body, it's not happy without blood. Certain parts of your body obviously require blood full time, but you can survive for a brief period of time, and there are other options. But if you run out of oxygen, your life is measured in seconds and not in anything else. So it's really thinking of that cash as your oxygen really hopefully helps make that point. Like you have to have it 100% of the time.
Yeah. And we get this question a lot. Actually, we just got a question from someone last week or recently about like they were having cash flow issues and they were like, all right, I have three options, I guess. Like, what would you advise us to do? And he was saying, well, I can self-fund the losses because he's in negative profit. I could
Yep.
find an investor. I could take on debt. And we were like, none of the above, please.
We were like, hold out until our live stream on Wednesday. You got to see this. No, of course we didn't say that, but if you can relate to that, today's live stream is for you. If you can and relate to that, and we've talked about this. I mean, if you've been in business for any period of time, you have probably run into some sort of a cash crunch at some point. And so, yeah, hopefully today's live stream is helpful in shifting the mindset around like how to approach this the right way.
Yeah. So we're going to go through our three main things that we want you to know about cash flow. If you've watched any of our other live streams, you probably know that we like to do things in threes. So it'll become as no surprise that we have three topics for you. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So if you have questions throughout this process, type them in the chat and we'll add them to our list at the end. So feel free to do that. But we've got topic number 1. We're going to ease our way into this cash flow topic. Topic number 1 is know your cash flow model. What does that mean?
So I'm assuming you're making me answer.
Yeah. Throwing it over to you.
Yeah. So the way to think of it is every different business, every different industry has some kind of standards about their cash flow. And in kind of more technical terms, they might talk about their operating cash flow, which has to do with, how you fund your operations, like your inventory, how fast your customers pay you, how long you get to take before you pay your vendors. And there's all this kind of technical jargon around that. And there's a math formula you can do. And for anybody who's excited about math, you can reach out to me. We'll nerd out and do it together. But the easiest way, like I like to think of it, is think of that timeline so you understand the flow of how your business works. And think about your cash flow in like waves. If you were standing on the beach and you're thinking about waves, right? And so are the waves all very similarly sized and they're very predictable pacing? And so that might be more like a recurring revenue business where I've got the credit card or the ACH on file. And I know that every month or every however often, I know that the invoice is going to be paid. Other businesses that are kind of somewhere in between, maybe they've got a little bit bigger waves, but the waves are a little more unpredictable, right? And so we don't know, you can, and it's like with me, we go out and stand in the ocean with my family and we try to predict, oh, that's going to be a big one. That's going to, and you're trying to look and you're trying to see. And as always happens, like you get caught off guard. The big ones aren't the ones that look like they're going to be big. Uh-huh. So in that kind of middle ground business, it's a little harder to predict what's what. Some businesses, their cash flow comes in giant waves every so often, and it crashes and smashes the shore. And, I always kind of think of it like, would I let my kids play in these waves? Right. And so think about your business that way. Does the cash flow happen in such a regular way that it's calm and it's predictable and you can teach your kids how to be safe and then you can relax and let them play? Because if it's the giant waves that crash and smash the beach, I don't know of anyone who's going to let their kids play in those waves, right? And so, unfortunately, by industry, cash flow kind of works in a similar way. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is like knowing the reality of the business that you're in.
Yeah. And we want to stick with this analogy for a little longer. We want to get you to the point that even if you have more unstable waves, unpredictable waves, that it's not impacting you as much. Like you're up on the beach where you're not getting hit by any of these waves. So it's okay. You can watch pleasantly.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, if we're back from the action and to do that, there are obviously certain things we have to do in terms of your cash flow to feel that way. But yes, that would be the goal, is that you aren't feeling like it's your children running around in these scary waves.
Yeah. And you can look past some unpredictability when you're small, right? Like if you're a solopreneur who builds websites, your only cash requirements, I mean, you might have a couple of subscriptions for like website builders and whatnot, but you're not paying anyone else. It's really just your own time is the cost. Versus when you have a company that employs people, your cash flow needs are a lot greater. Like you can't miss payroll.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a big shift. I mean, people have to get like, that is the pit in your stomach if you're an employer and you get into this sort of model where, you now know what it feels like to be that person on the receiving end of a paycheck. You know how important and that seriously you take that. Mm-hmm. And yet businesses don't pay other businesses. Customers don't always pay you with the same sort of consistency and guarantee. And so it kind of puts you as that buffer, and that can be a scary place to be.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what the different businesses models are? You mentioned recurring. A thumbs up just popped up.
Thumbs up. Hey, thumbs up for recurring. We like recurring. Yeah, I mean, recurring, everybody knows the secret is out, right? Recurring businesses, subscription businesses are the best kind of cash flow business. Typically the easiest to build infrastructure and business around. And so we want to, wherever possible, push our clients to be in a more recurring model. And I would say kind of a middle ground is like what I would call a product model or a reoccurring model, which means, I've got small predictable amount of orders. That could be like, hey, I'm in I run a fast food chain. And so I know like at lunch hour, it's going to be busy. And I know this is kind of what a typical order looks like in terms of value and my most popular items, that sort of thing. So the waves are a little more predictable. They're not as good as recurring, right? Which is why, and I'll give you another example that paints the picture of why companies are trying so hard to go that other route. Take a car wash, right? 15 years ago, you just drove up, you put in your money, you went through the car wash. That was it. There was not an alternative model. Mm-hmm. Now, every new car wash they build is trying to get you to sign up for the car wash club. And it's like, you pay us $30 a month or whatever that number is, and you get to have unlimited car. Well, the reason they're doing that is because they want to pivot from this kind of small, reoccurring product-based business into a subscription model, because they know that it is so much more predictable, sustainable, easy for them to operate, and ultimately makes their business more valuable.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first two options. Then the last one is the big scary waves. Okay. This is a project model. And so, we use the example of a web designer, right? Well, 15 years ago, people were designing websites. But then they realized that if I'm doing these websites and my main way of growing is to do more websites or bigger websites, then this kind of work ebbs and flows in these big waves. And if I allow my customers to pay me when the website's done, and instead of doing a $5,000 website, I'm now doing a $15,000 website, that means my cash flow is zero. So the beach, it's like when the water's pulling out into the ocean, and then boom, the big wave comes. Well, it's scary, right? There's a lot of danger and threat related to that. And so people have transitioned from those types of business models and typically try to make it a little more like, hey, we're going to want 4 payments over the 4 months we're working on this project, or we're going to want to tie this to like SEO or something that's a little more predictable. Yep. So it's those big wave project-based businesses. And hey, I own project-based businesses to some extent. So I get it. There are some industries where that's just the reality of how it works. There's no car wash of the month club that you can create for those businesses, but you have to know that going in. And that's really what this point we're making is about. Like, really know your business, make the best of it, but know the reality that you're facing.
Yeah. What do you say for people that are in a project-based business? How do they ease the cash flow issues a little bit?
Well, I'll tell you where it gets really tricky is long-term, believe it or not, a lot of cash flow gets ironed out by sustaining profitability. And so this is why you and we just obsess over profit, because the only thing scarier than being in the ebbs and flows and the wild ride of a cash flow project business is being in that business when it's losing money.
Yeah.
That takes the scariness, and then the wave's not big enough to pay all your bills back. And so it's like, wait a minute, I was just robbing Peter to pay Paul the whole time until the payment comes. The payment comes and I'm not really made whole. That's terrifying. So making money, that's the first one. And so that's, we work with clients who are in that kind of a business to really understand their costs, like really understand them and understand like how they hit, get really in depth. But then the other piece of the puzzle, if you're dealing with that, is not only being profitable, but it's about having a war chest of cash. And I hate to say that because I'm all for, with the right cash model, that you should be taking money out of the business. But if you've got giant waves you're depending on and you don't know when that next wave is going to come, the only way to sustain is to have enough cash on hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Woo, it's a rough one, but okay. So that's the importance of knowing your cash flow model. You can plan ahead for those big waves if you have them. But we're going to switch now into what we have to tell like clients and friends most of the time. And this is going to be a little bit more tough love. Like you
Here
might
comes the tough love.
Yeah. So what is the worst type of funding that you can get?
Yeah. So I love this topic because it is like, as a business owner, and if you're running a business, if you own a business, like the second half of your life begins when you start asking for hard feedback. Like, I want to know the truth. Stop blowing smoke to me. I don't care if it's employees or, customers or friends or peers or people, who are supporting my business. Tell me the truth. Like, don't blow smoke. And so one of the things I'll tell people when I catch them starting down this path is I'm like, oh, wait a second. You know what the worst type of funding is? Because it'll really get their attention. Like, okay, and they know, like, uh-oh, I must have just said the wrong thing. The worst type of funding is one of two things. It's like you're covering up your losses with extra cash instead of addressing the underlying problem. So we talked about that with project-based businesses. Project-based businesses that operate at a loss in that kind of a wild ride cash model, you know what happens to them? They go out of business. That's it. There is no other option, because no one's going to swoop in and say, well, let me get this straight. You got these wild cash rides. You operated at a loss. You ran out of money. Absolutely, I'd love to put some money into that deal. Like, no one would ever say that, right? You don't see Silicon Valley VC backed companies where they're just crazy enough to be happy to pouring money into businesses with that kind of model. They're not. They're pouring money into businesses with a recurring revenue subscription type model where they can just make it hand over fist once they get over the hump. So you're not, to be clear, if you're watching this, you're probably not VC backed. You're probably not living the Silicon Valley like startup life. Make money all the time. Do not give, if I've got money in the bank, that's not an excuse to lose money. If I've got a big check that's coming in tomorrow, not an excuse to lose money, right? So that's the first big one.
Yeah. And we see that. I mean, this is the scenario that we mentioned earlier where, they're losing money and they're like, do I take out a line of credit to get me through this? What they think is going to be a temporary slump, right? And this is the question we get. It's like, we're going to do better. It's just this short period of time. Should I take out a line of credit? And the answer is no, because what that means that you're doing is you're just digging yourself a deeper hole. And that's unfortunate. And it's not as much fun. And what that means is that you have to make really hard decisions, but you have to stop digging the hole.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would advise, like, think of it if you were with your friend and you went to a casino and your friend is playing blackjack or something, and they've got a little stack of chips and then they just start burning through them. Right. And it's not going well. And then they turn to you and they're like, hey, Rachel, can I borrow $100? Are you feeling good about this money that you would give? Like, is this $100 going to do your friend or you any favors? Probably not. And so to that point, this is not we're riding the wave of cash flow, but we've got a really profitable business. There are times in a very profitable business you could still run out of money. But if your friend turns to you with a crazy look in their eye and they just blew $100 on blackjack and they're looking at you like, hey, Rachel, can I get $100? You're going to say no. And it's not because I think you're going to stiff me. It's not because it's because this is a terrible idea. Please stop.
Yeah. And why we say that, because you might find someone who is willing to loan you money if you're like far enough up the river from this. But the problem is if you are using a line of credit to cover like temporary losses, what happens if the loss isn't temporary? And now you are even further in the hole. And then if, God forbid, your business does run out of money, now you owe back more money than you otherwise would have.
Yes. And that's what that's the exact scenario you're picturing for your friend, right?
Yeah.
You're like, this isn't a temporary loss. You didn't just catch a bad beat. Like, this is a bad idea, right? Like, you're pursuing the wrong thing. And so, interestingly, to your point, you might find somebody based on some prior performance, but that's the equivalent of going to a bank and saying, give me a line of credit when you're losing money, right? Exactly to your point. The bank may look at historical and they may not know what's currently happening, but the bank looks at your numbers because they're trying to spot the person at the blackjack table with the crazed look in their eye. And that's why they don't just say, okay, well, you're a nice person. You could explain your business well. Like, you've got good personal credit. You've been in business for 12 years. Absolutely, you can have money. They look at the financials. They're looking at trends. And so they're looking to see, is there an underlying problem? And if you're not making money, they won't loan you money.
Mm-hmm. So we have a bonus, other worst type of funding for you. What's problem number 2 that you see people get into?
Yeah. So problem number 2 is using the wrong type of funding for the wrong reason, right? So in other words, we just talked about one type of putting money in because you're losing. Another one is like if you use short-term funding, but you use it over the long term, it gets really expensive. And so the
Mm.
best example there is like, credit cards. There are people and hey, I've been part of a business. When I came into my first business, one of the things that was wrong with the business was that they had used credit cards like it was a line of credit. So they had $100,000 in credit card bills they couldn't pay. And that is the worst way. That's worse from a financing standpoint, from the actual percentage you're having to pay. That's far worse than a line of credit.
Mhm.
So using the wrong kind of debt device for the wrong purpose, it always ends up just costing you more money, and then that exacerbates your entire problem.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the percentage on interest is very different on a credit card versus a line of credit. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and a lot of them have that, like you missed a payment or you only paid the minimum, they have the right to kick the rate up even higher.
Mhm.
And so there's a reason every credit card company exists is incorporated in Delaware. I'm not kidding. And that's because Delaware has the most lenient laws around charging financing.
Mm.
And so literally every one of those companies, they incorporate there because they want to have the most aggressive possible laws within the country, to try and go after people. And so it's 18% or 28% or 30% as opposed to 8% for a line of credit. And right now it's 8%, but I mean, back in the golden days, it was 3 or 4% people were getting for lines of credit. So, the rate is dramatic. And if you're not great with math, please take my word. That's an absurd difference. That's an insane difference because it compounds.
Yeah, we have this question for later, but can you talk a little bit about when it is right to use a credit card versus paying with cash versus using a line of credit?
Absolutely. So for a mature, established business that is profitable, I love credit cards. Love them because I want to charge on them. I want to get that float, which is what we call it. Basically, the period of time where I've charged and paid for it. The vendor's gotten paid, but I've yet to have to come out of pocket. So I kind of get free financing, and
Mhm.
then I pay 100% of the bill the day it's due.
Yep.
Never 99%, never 76%. I pay 100%. And if done right, I can get the float. And one of the great carve out like backdoor sweetheart deals that exist in this world, one of the very few, is that if you get airline miles or you get 2% back on a credit card, whatever that is, that goes directly to the business owner who's had to personally guarantee that credit card. That is not taxed. Now, talk to your CPA. I'm not a CPA. This has been kind of gunned for over time where they've said like, oh, wait a minute. But the reality is you've taken risk. So you have done something to earn this. And so anyway, but getting that cash back going directly to the business owner, that's a huge deal. That's a really big benefit. And so if you can get the float, which helps the business, and a little kickback to the owner, which helps, the whole picture, that's a really, really nice deal. So I love credit cards, but if you find yourself saying, well, what if I only paid this amount? Like, hold on, we're doing it wrong. We're going down the wrong path. That is not the right way to use this.
So if you find that like you can't pay off your full balance, that's when you would want to shift over to potentially a line of credit?
Correct. And again, we're saying in both these scenarios, you're a profitable business. You're
Yeah.
just having the cash flow waves. And that's
Mhm.
okay. Cash flow waves happen even in very, very successful businesses. So yes, what you would then want to pivot to is some sort of a line of credit that would allow you to borrow against it, keep it for a prolonged period of time. You can usually keep it for weeks or months if needed, and then pay it back. And again, when the banker takes a look at your numbers, what they're going to want to see is that you're making enough profit that you could have paid this off. You're just kind of softening the blow of cash flow by having this line of credit exercised, and you're willing and your business is fully capable of paying the interest to get that buffer.
Yeah. When used right, it's great. You get the
Oh yeah.
float and the rewards for it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. No, I love it. When it's working great, I love it. When it's not, it's like evil, how bad it could be. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously.
All right, so we're gonna switch over to our topic number 3, and this one is really a mindset that you have to have if you're a small business, and that is there is no option to run out of money. Don't ever consider that there's even an option to run out of money, and you'll be leaps and bounds above others. We have this idea that like what we see on TV about VC-backed companies works in real life. We're like, what is it? Uber that has never, I don't know, I'm making this up. But one of these main companies has like never been profitable and they're still getting funding. I don't get that. Don't think that that's going to work for you in the
No.
small business world. It will not.
No, it definitely won't. And you know, obviously we're not in that VC world. It's not really business in real life.
Right.
And unfortunately, so much of like entrepreneurship in the news and entrepreneurship in magazines and just kind of like, you know, what we see and what people hear about, that's what gets a lot of hype. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, the Shark Tank thing, like my company got valued at this big number. Now somebody's going to put money into it. The reality is like those businesses need to make money. If they're making good enough money, they don't necessarily need that outside influence, right? Unless you're trying to do something truly Amazon, Uber scale, where it's going to be worldwide. But 99.99 forever percent of businesses, they don't fit that description. And so, yeah, there's the other thing is I always laugh is like there's that old saying about banks, which is like who else could get away with a business model where you don't give the customers who need money. You only give it to the ones who don't absolutely need it, right? And so, I mean, that's absolutely it, right? If you run your business completely out of cash and then you go down to talk to the local bank, you know, they're practically going to laugh you out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's really interesting is, when in my business that have lines of credit, which I love a line of credit, always want to have a line of credit. I've got one business, we've never touched it. We've had it for 3 or 4 years. We don't ever touch the line of credit because we haven't needed to, but we wouldn't wait until we had $10 left to exercise the line of credit. When we got down below like our minimum threshold for cash on hand, we'd start pulling on the line of credit. We're never going to run totally dry and have an unexercised line of credit because believe it or not, the bank would do the same thing. Wait a minute. You ran out of cash here and you had a line of credit. Like who's running that place? Right.
Yeah.
So it's all about learning how to manage it the right way.
Yeah. And even so, if you don't have access to a line of credit, honestly, sometimes the best businesses are ones that never had an option but to have positive cash flow because they don't have these other resources that are available to them. It's like I am making money or I'm out of business.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And some of the smartest, like from meeting many entrepreneurs and having a lot of those conversations, one of the things I love the most is when I hear a story where they like dumb lucked their way into this amazing, you know, business model structure, the way they get paid, the way they accept work from clients. Like sometimes just, you know, necessity does breed innovation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you find that, or when you look at your business, that's a really, really powerful thing. I know we have at least one client who has an amazing cash model. Like their business is set because they are never upside down on cash. They've never spent a dollar that wasn't already paid for by a client. And so you get into that position and then you iron out your profitability and you start to scale, like the sky's the limit. Your new customers will pay for you to grow.
That is a nice situation.
That's right.
Really, the ideal scenario here is that you have the mindset like to never run out of money. You always have to be cash flow positive, but you still have the backup of like a line of credit if you need it. But just
Absolutely.
the assumption that you should never need to use it.
Yeah. And I like internally to use a savings account in a similar way. It's like my first line of defense, then a line of credit. And again, there is no option beyond the line of credit. Like I wouldn't list credit cards or, you know, dipping into my personal money or going to friends and family. I wouldn't list those things in that category. They shouldn't even be on the table for consideration because it goes back to what you said. The mindset is I'm never going to run out of money. I've got, you know, my savings account, I've got my operating account, my savings account. I've got money on my line of credit that I could pull. And as long as I'm not doing that to lose money, then I'm okay. It's just, it's a matter of timing to get my cash back.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone if they were saying, if I don't borrow money, what do I do if I need money?
Well, again, I mean, harsh reality. Here's the here's the tough love. Stop losing money. If you're losing money, you need to recognize if you're being that person who's sitting at the blackjack table and you got the crazy look in your eyes and you're turning to your friend or to the bank or whomever, and you're like, no, I can get this back. You've got to fix the underlying business that you have. It has to be profitable. That is number one. And then everything else is just about, covering that float. We love credit cards because they give us float, but we can get a bank to give us float. We can cover that float other ways. But the whole concept of float is that it's a timing thing. We're not borrowing money to just lose money.
Yeah. And it's not like we're saying that this whole concept of, well, just stop losing money is an easy thing to do. It is not. You usually have to have some very big self-reflections in your business. You probably have to make some really tough decisions. This is where having a third party come in and look at it with you is oftentimes helpful, that are not quite as close to the business as you are. But that's where, like, do you have to let people go? Do you have to downsize your facility? Do you have to let go of some expenses that you just can't afford right now?
Yeah.
So it's not easy by any means, but you have to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The thing that we say too is if you tolerate something long enough, it becomes normal. If you're tolerating losing money, then it's like, well, I mean, I've been doing this for a while and my business hasn't ended yet. Don't ever think that losing money is normal.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you're right. What I love is when people get to the point where making a lot of money feels normal.
Yes.
And then that becomes their expectation. It's like, well, wait a minute, I've done it before. I know I can do it again. Like, this is what I should do constantly. So, yeah.
Love that positive flip. Those are the 3 things that we had for you for cash flow. Colin, do you have any other things that you'd like to add before we go over to Q&A and I'll check what we have?
I just want to say, like, I've been there. Everybody's heard, I've lived it. Okay. I've been big project-based businesses. I've been in businesses that were losing money, that we were in the process of turning around, and they were dealing with massive cash problems at the time. I've had to stop digging that hole deeper, fill back in the hole, eventually get to the point where, hey, we didn't have a lot in the bank, but we didn't owe anything to anybody. Like, we had paid all of our debts. We were totally covered. And then build up from there with a, cash reserve and finally be able to get lines of credit. I mean, I've been in a business before when I first started that it was ineligible for a line of credit. It was not an option.
Yeah.
I'll just say to people, I know that feeling. I always say when you have cash flow problems, those are the only problems that you can focus on. And so, it's everything until it's a non-issue. And so, let's take that tough love, take a good look in the mirror, figure out what it's going to take, right? Get the right people around you to help solve this problem and get after it.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, let's dive into a question. We have a question from Asaph. Might be pronouncing that wrong. Sorry if I am. What's an effective way of keeping track of all of the online subscriptions one has to have? And this is something very near and dear to our hearts because we have a lot of subscriptions. Honestly, the really boring answer from my perspective is that I just categorize them all under subscriptions in our accounting software. So like we use QBO. And then I track it that way. I know that there are other tools that you can use, like I think it's called Rocket Money or Mint. Oh, my thumbs up came back again. That can track things for you. I personally have never used them, but I've heard a lot of great things that will track all the subscriptions you have and let you know maybe if you haven't used them in a while, or they'll do some negotiation for you. So you can look into those if you're looking for another thing to help you manage your subscriptions.
Yeah, I love this. And I'll just add a couple of little tidbits, kind of the old fashioned way, like you're saying, is number one, have everything categorized right. Like that's important no matter if you're using a tool like Rocket Money or one of the others that are out there. It's so funny how subscription to death we all are. It's bad when just a few years ago you started seeing like TV commercials and stuff for these different tools, and they're like tired of all these subscriptions, and somebody's like, wait, I have two accounts for Hulu. So whatever it is, like we know we're experiencing in our personal life, you experience it in your business, there are certain subscriptions that are required for you to be a successful and efficient, company. Those are good, and obviously you should have those. But if they're all categorized correctly, a couple of things I would say is, this is I put this in like the quarterly category, where this is a deep dive you should be doing at least quarterly, going through, pull that, dues and subscriptions category in your profit and loss statement, run the detailed version, not the one that just tells me the amount, but the one that says every single charge, and go through it with a fine tooth comb. I mean, really get after it and figure out what all's in there. So that's not the, highly leveraged tech solution, but it also gives you a really in-depth understanding of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And then I'll give you a quick sneak preview, because we're going to talk about this next week, but get somebody else on the team to help you with this. Like, someone else can own, you can have the subscription czar within the company, who's like, Tommy owns subscriptions. Like, if Tommy doesn't, approve it, it can't happen. And Tommy's responsible for that quarterly review, and it's on Tommy's calendar, right? Like, there's a way to delegate this out. It's a great way to bring people along into that financial accountability realm. And I think that's a really powerful thing for people to do.
Yeah. And Asaph said that he didn't think of QBO. Great tip. Like, yeah, sometimes it's really the simple things.
I know. It really is. It's crazy. Like, but I think I love this, because when we're getting down that path, it's like we're getting better, right? Like, that's what I'm obsessed with, is I want to get better every day, every week, every month.
Yeah. What do you think? Should we do one more question?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on fire. We were frozen at the beginning. I mean, we're still making up for that. Like, what was that? Nobody knows. I'm terrified. I haven't looked yet. I'm just so terrified. I had like a really bad face.
Yeah, we'll have to go look at the recording and be like, woohoo! It can be our new Facebook profile picture.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is talking about either collecting payments or making payments to your vendors. When should you use a credit card versus cash for paying your vendors? When should you request a credit card or cash for receiving payments from your clients?
Oh, I'm really excited about this question, because I get to somewhat correct the record. Okay. I was saying earlier, I was getting all excited about the cash flow impact and the float of credit cards. When we're paying with a credit card, okay, one of the very first things we do is we find the list of all of our vendors, and we'll do this campaign. This should also be kind of on your quarterly list. Go through any vendor that you're sending checks to and just call them and ask, do you accept credit card? Are there any fees? The second question is very, very important. Yes. Because what will happen is people will start paying with a credit card, and then it's a 3% fee and a 3% fee and so the inverse is happening, where I get really excited when the 2% cash back comes, to the owner of the company. That's an exciting moment. But when we're paying 3% on top of whatever we negotiated or agreed to, that seemingly small amount eats us up. And if it's really just saving us, usually on average about 20 to 25 days is what that float is. I'll do the math for you. It's not good. If you were to take 365 days in the year, divided by 20, multiply it by 3%, like that is, you're back to credit card, like as if you paid the interest on the credit card. It's a big, obscene amount of additional cost. Mm-hmm. So when you're paying with a credit card, if there are no fees and you can get the float and you're a mature company, it pays the bill in full, love it. Likewise, there are fees associated with accepting credit cards. So I don't want to accept credit cards on ongoing. Look at it as I'm taking that credit card to offset the risk. Like, in our business, we'll take a credit card for that first month. And it's not to say that we think our client's not going to pay us, but it just smooths out the sailing. Everything's so easy. Like, just swipe the credit card, go. And then in future payments, we want to transition to ACH, because it doesn't typically cost the client anything and it doesn't cost us anything. And so that's kind of the way to look at, in my mind, receiving payments with credit card versus check or ACH. And the one we all hate is like the checks in the mail thing, right? Like, go to ACH, get a lockbox, get a credit card machine. Like, let's get more innovative ways than just accepting a check in the USPS.
What do you say to people that have clients who are like, can you please accept credit card all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I just think you have that open, candid conversation with people. Everyone knows. Like, I feel like there was a time, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but 15, 20 years ago, when you would take a credit card, it's like the person who was paying with it hadn't really factored in the fact that there are fees associated with it. And so when we do our call campaign and I've got a credit card in hand, and I'm calling vendors to get them to accept this credit card, the minute they tell me if there's a fee, I'm not like offended. I don't think that they've, done something wrong, or they say, hey, the fees thing, which is, I don't want to get into the complexity of it, but it's not against the law to charge fees. It's sometimes against your merchant agreement with your credit card company to charge fees. So you get into this weird debate about, well, you can't put a fee on my thing. And so sometimes you just have to say, well, it'll have to be reflected in your prices. Like, it's a very real cost. 3% of revenue is a big deal to us. We try to run a lean company. We're going to have to reflect that in our pricing. We're going to have to charge a fee. Like, I'm sorry, Mr. Customer. And I mean, I've never had one person like get really offended and think that somehow you're not taking care of them. So I like in my businesses to have a credit card machine for urgency's sake, to offset risk. And sometimes if somebody's being squirrely about paying, it's like, well, hey, we take credit card.
Yep.
Just pull it out and swipe it and let's move on with life if I feel like there's going to be some issue with getting paid.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that you can appeal to your status as a small business owner. So if it's a large company, you can say, well, you know what, I'm a small business owner. I'd really appreciate if we could do ACH. That can go a long way. And the same goes for if you're trying to pay your vendors with credit card versus ACH. If it's a really big company, they'll probably accept credit card. If it's a small business, kind of like yours, it would be nice and helpful to do an ACH.
Yeah. And what's funny is I talked about pulling out that list and calling vendors. If I know they're like a legitimately small business, we don't even call them.
Yeah.
Like, we'll set up ACH, or we'll just pay them by check. We'll pay them whatever other method that's zero cost to them. Because to your point, bigger companies have already kind of factored that into the way they do business. If they have a retail front, but they also ship stuff or whatever, they just assume people are paying with credit card. It's already factored into so why would I not take advantage of it? But yes, for little guys, and so it works both ways. As a little guy, which I consider all of us little until we're, approaching 9 figures, we're all relatively little. Just be honest. Like, hey, I'm a little guy. Like, I'm not a bank. I want to do the best job possible. Is there some way you could pay me? And what's interesting is I've never had anyone, when I just showed that vulnerability and was honest about that, never had one person be like, I don't care, that's your problem. Never once. So, and I've been doing this for a long time. So don't be afraid to tell people, like, hey, call up existing clients. Like, I know I've always taken a credit card from you. I'm sure you're getting some sort of miles or something. I hate to do this, but man, these credit card fees are just eating me up. Like, I really need to get people transition. I'll give you an extra month or two and then we'll get it switched. Is that okay? And every time, 9 times out of 10, they're like, you know what, go ahead and switch it this month. It's fine.
Yeah. When you add that human element, we've talked about that before, I think in our COGS live stream, but when you add that human element, it makes such a difference.
It's everything.
Yeah. Well, that's what we've got. So next week, we'll see you around for overhead. We'll finish out our profit playbook. And if you're watching this as a replay, or if you're thinking about it later and like, oh man, I had this really important cash flow question that I didn't get to typing out in time, feel free to keep putting them in the comment box. We'll be monitoring it. We'll be answering more of those questions over the coming days. So you didn't miss your chance. Keep adding those questions. And happy Wednesday.
No.
We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.